Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Friday, March 16th, coming up on 6 o'clock Eastern Time in the U.S. and coming up on 11 p.m. in London, where you folks on the other side are getting ready for Beast of the East 2, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But I want to start off with, I'm going to kind of switch back and forth. We've got the new GFS run of the model, and I want to have enough of it out so by the time we get to it, to discuss what the possibilities for the middle part of next week. We have a number of players in this game that we're trying to figure out with what could be the fourth nor'easter in 2.5 weeks, or what I'm calling basically hashtag foureaster, which a friend of mine came up with. But and then Jason might be on here tonight, Jason Schaefer. But in the meantime, I figured how to do something, so this might work. So let's try it out. I have here, I'm bringing up the upper air from the GFS from earlier today. This is for Monday evening, and I'm going to describe to you what's happening here when we're talking about puzzle pieces. Now, we have a few things here that are going to all be working together, or perhaps working against each other. This is really going to be key here with respect to how this all winds up playing out. When you have so many different puzzle pieces, a change in one is going to change the outcome to all of them. So let me just point out some of those puzzle pieces that we have. First off, we have a storm system. I'm hoping that this works out right. I'm experimenting here. So let's see. I don't know why it made that box. That wasn't supposed to happen. All right, so I'll try that again. I wonder why it did this. Let me see what you guys are seeing here. Hang on a second. Let me have to try this again. Yeah, I don't know why it did that. Let me see if I can get this again. I want to get this to where I can draw on these maps while I'm on air with you. It didn't seem to work there at that one. So let's try this again. Maybe this will work. All right, I think this is going to work a bit better if I just kind of freehand draw it. Okay, so you can see it here. We've got this is the upper air storm that's sitting near Newfoundland, and that is basically blocked. If you look to the east, there's a big ridge up in the Atlantic that's building up toward Iceland and into Greenland, that where I put the purple line here. So there's a big upper high there. In the meantime, coming in from the west coast, we have all sorts of energy, and when we move to Monday night, you've got this lead piece that is in the lower Mississippi Valley, and you've got another piece that is moving out down into the northern plains, and there's actually even still another piece that's basically swinging around this upper low out to the east. And in terms of how this all plays out, it's about timing. And the big question, I think, and probably the most important question, is the upper low that's east of Newfoundland. It's kind of in a bit of a delicate position here with regards to what's going to happen in the eastern part of the United States. In order for a storm to move up the east coast, I drew the arrow a little bit too far inland, but there's another one offshore, or perhaps moving it straight out to the east. This upper low has to pull out just far enough to the east so that it allows for room here. Right now, the flow is all, strong northwest northerly flow coming out of Canada, so that's going to suppress any systems coming eastward to the south. That's what's happening actually tomorrow when we have a low now in the Central Plains that's moving out. That is going to get suppressed and just weaken. But models are forecasting the system in Newfoundland to pull out just enough to allow room for whatever system is down here to approach the east coast and make some kind of a turn northeastward. What will actually happen is the surface low will go into the Tennessee Valley or the lower Ohio Valley and redevelop along the Carolinas and then kind of move its way northeastward from there. But if that upper low doesn't get out of the way, this thing could wind up getting suppressed to the south, and that is another possibility through all of this. Plus, you've got all this other energy getting involved. Does a lead piece come out and weaken, and a stronger second piece makes for a second wave maybe on Wednesday and Wednesday night? Big question. It's unusual to get back-to-back waves like that, but this has been an unusual month. So if anything weird's going to happen, this will probably be the month that we would see it. Now, I also want to bring up what is being called the Beast of the East 2, and that is the cold air that is spreading across Europe and into Britain and Ireland. And in fact, you can see here, this is for Sunday morning at 6 a.m. There is snow forecast by the GFS, at least, along the east shores of Ireland and over parts of southwestern England and Wales and over parts of Scotland. What's happening is, you have high pressure that's coming in from the east and building to the west, much like what happened a couple of weeks ago, and that is creating a strong easterly flow of cold air. Notice a large chunk of Europe here where those east winds are blowing. This is all snow that's going to fall during Saturday night into Sunday. Now this high is going to move out eventually, and the cold air will moderate later next week, but you're going to have at least several days of very cold weather across Europe. So, at this point, I think, let me see if I got to get rid of this window. And now I'm going to bring myself back up. I'm a work in progress here, folks. But we're going to take a look now at, we'll take a look at a couple of the models that we saw today in terms of the rather wide range of outcomes here. And I'm going to be very honest and upfront about the fact that I really don't know how this is all going to turn out yet. There's just too much going on, and I don't think you could really give any kind of certitude to any of this at this point. It's just way too early. Too much can happen in too many different directions. Now, I'm going to go to the GFS from earlier, because we're still not out far enough here on this run. So let's go back one run and show you what happens here. So this is, right now, this storm system is moving through the Central Plains and is actually producing quite a bit of snow and sleet and rain in some areas, but it's also going to weaken very rapidly because, as we saw on the map before that I had up when I had up the upper air for North America, the strong northwest flow in the eastern part of the United States is going to basically weaken and suppress anything that comes eastward. And in fact, you see what happens by the time we get to Saturday afternoon. There's an area of snow that moves into northern West Virginia, northern Virginia, and then just kind of weakens as that low just basically disappears. Now, the next energy, and I'll back it up, so we've got this system that is coming in now into the west coast with rain and snow in California and up through parts of Oregon and Nevada. Now that starts coming eastward, and so you have this block out near Newfoundland. This low is just sitting there, so the low is going to try and move northeastward, but it can't. So again, so it basically gets pushed eastward. You can see the GFS actually takes the low into western Kentucky, and the primary into southern West Virginia, redevelops it along the Virginia-North Carolina coast. This is by Tuesday afternoon, an area of snow on the northern fringe of this, and that continues into Tuesday night and early Wednesday. You have a wave that's sitting off the Virginia coast. Now, what will happen is that wave goes out, and then a second wave develops because you have another arm of energy swinging around, and that creates more snow for Wednesday night into Thursday. And this is the reason why the GFS went crazy with snow amounts, and it's kind of pointless to bring them up, but I'll show them to you. They're not a forecast. I'll show you them to you in a second. Also, look out in the west. While all this is going on, there is going to be quite a bit of storm action in the western part of the U.S. later next week. A really strong surge of heavy rain and heavy snow coming into the western part of the U.S., and by the end of next week, it's going to actually get pretty cold here across central and northern California and on up through Oregon and Washington, even showing some snow near coastal areas, and that's going to continue into next weekend. So hopefully by that time, the pattern here in the east will be a bit more settled by then with whatever happens in the middle of the week. But I'll show you on the upper air, because the upper air here really really illustrates this a bit better. And I'm going to make sure I'm back one run, which it will go to shortly, hopefully. Yes. Okay, so you see how the lines here run from the northern Great Lakes to off the east coast of the northeast. So we have a strong northwest flow here. If we back up to the present time, here's the system that's in the plains tonight. You see how it comes eastward? It just disappears. You could barely pick out the shortwave here because of that northwest flow. Just basically overwhelms and squashes it. Now, early next week, that upper low to the east tries to pull out, and this next system is a bit more developed, so it holds together a bit better, but you can also see more energy that comes down out of the plains that gets involved, and you wind up getting this second wave that develops. That's the GFS's view, by the way. The European has a whole different idea about all of this because, again, it's about timing of these puzzle pieces, the timing of all these short waves. And here's the one for tomorrow. They're both in lockstep with this. Here's the system coming into the west now. The system in the plains just dies and it's gone. So now we're into Sunday and Monday. Monday, here's your system now in Oklahoma. That is the one, the system in question. You still have this northwest flow in the northeast. But one of the things that the European does is that it really doesn't pull that flow out completely. It still has basically a west-northwest flow across the northeast. This shortwave, the lead shortwave, winds up weakening, and then the second one gets forced further south and gets kicked out straight east. Look at the surface map with the European, and I'll pull that up for you here. You're going to see that the European, which by the way can't bring any precip further north than southern New Jersey, and only there for a brief moment in time. Where is that map? Sorry, just trying to get the one that's a little easier on the eyes. All right, so I'll just back this up, and you can see that here's the European, the low in southern Illinois, and because it can't lift up northeast. Why am I missing this? Something's wrong here. Oh, I'm sorry. I lost my time frame. Okay, so this is the present time. Here's that first low coming out of the Central Plains. So that falls apart. We know that. Here's the second one in Oklahoma. This is Monday. Now this is Tuesday. And again, it can't lift because this storm in Newfoundland is not completely out of the way, or at least enough out of the way to allow this to lift up. And then this system just gets pushed pretty much straight east-northeast or east-northeast way out to the south. Now, this would have implication, by the way. This sort of track would have implications that there will be some heavy snows for West Virginia, northwestern Virginia, possibly through Maryland, maybe southern Pennsylvania at the absolute furthest north point, and for the Delmarva Peninsula. But that northern fringe might even be too far to the north if that low is as far south as it is, and it moves out to the east. The GFS, just to give you a straight comparison, I'm going to switch to the new run in just a second. So let me do that. Let's do that instead. So I'm going to go to the new GFS run. Let's see if we have enough of it. I think we should. So let's put up the precip on the new GFS. And, okay, so here comes that low. This is for Monday now. We have a low in Oklahoma, and then it's in southern Missouri, moving into Kentucky. At this point, the GFS is still, is further north than the European. You'll notice that the isobars there's a weakness here in North Carolina, South Carolina. That's probably where some kind of secondary is going to develop. Then this is by Tuesday morning, it's got snow almost to New York City, a northern band of snow here, low pressure moving into southern West Virginia. To the north, we've got a very cold high that's going to be building across just north of the Great Lakes and spreading into southeastern Canada. That's going to be important here because that is going to allow low-level cold air to bleed southward. And by the way, remember that there's deep snowpack across all of New York State and New England here, so that will help to reinforce cold air. Models in the first three nor'easters were not cold enough, so we might have that same error this time around. So this is Tuesday morning. So let's go to the next one, which is Tuesday afternoon, 2 p.m. So there's your first wave. Low kind of gets left back in western, the dying primary, western North Carolina, the secondary wave, east-northeast of the Delaware coast, snowing into southernmost Connecticut, southeastern New York State, looks like south of 84, New Jersey, over Long Island. Then that first wave pulls out. Now, I'm going to just tell you, it's very unusual to see back-to-back waves. Oftentimes what happens is one will just kind of dominate over the other, and you wind up with one that, if there's a system as far north as this one is, the second one may wind up getting suppressed to the south. So it's kind of hard to buy the two-wave concept because models do show that from time to time, but it rarely happens. So now we're at Tuesday night into early Tuesday night, and there's your second wave developing east of the North Carolina coast with snows in the mountains of western Virginia, and a cold rain into the Carolinas. I mean, I'm just going to guess here before we go to the next frame that low is going to shoot out to the northeast, and it tries. Snow through Virginia through Maryland and Virginia, not quite into Delaware and southern New Jersey here by Wednesday morning. And then you can see that second wave just kind of pulls away. And yet a third low develops along the Carolina coast by Wednesday evening with snow into central New Jersey and back down through much of Virginia and into the mountains of North Carolina. So you see how crazy this is. This is going to be so difficult to forecast. We're not going to have any clarity on this at all until at the earliest, I would say, is Monday. Okay, at the absolute earliest. And with all these different short waves running around, every run is going to key on something else. But I think that the most important thing, and watch how the upper air plays out. Look at the northwest flow that's in New England. Here's the upper low that approaches in southern Missouri. You'll see that flow just relaxes enough. The first short wave has just enough room as it moves northeastward. And now that second trough from Minnesota down into the Gulf states takes over. And this would be for Wednesday night and Thursday as it tries to lift the cutoff low up the East Coast. Lots and lots of uncertainty here, folks. Make no mistake. As I said, no clarity on this at all is going to be coming through this weekend. We're going to be just going back and forth on all of this. Let's go back over to Europe and take a look at what the model is doing with this on the new run. And there's your snow for you folks in England and also for Ireland during the day Saturday. This is midnight Saturday night into Sunday morning. Looks like a fair amount of snow. Actually, a low develops in the English Channel. That may give a little extra boost to that snow in southwestern England Saturday night into Sunday morning. And then after that, weather conditions do improve. So this is a quick shot of cold air, it seems. And then you start to get some warmer air from the Atlantic later next week with a couple of storms on the horizon. It looks like one weather front that moves through on Friday, and then there's a deeper offshore storm southwest of Ireland. Perhaps that's coming for next weekend. So you get the idea here, folks. Everything, I think, at this point, I think it's pretty easy to figure that everything is on the table with regards to whatever is going to happen next week for the fourth nor'easter, or if it or as I call it, the foureaster. And right now, just to give you a view of what's happening at the moment, you've got this stripe of winter weather advisories up from northwestern Virginia on up through Ohio and Indiana, back to about Chicago. Winter storm warnings up tonight over parts of northern Nebraska, parts of southwestern and southern South Dakota, southeastern Montana. In the west, winter storm warnings in the mountains in eastern California, back into parts of Nevada, and also into parts of Idaho. And very, very busy indeed with regards to the weather scenario. And I'm pretty sure that those red flag warnings that you see up through eastern New Mexico, northern Texas, Oklahoma, and into parts of southern Kansas as a result of the very dry conditions that we have been seeing out there. So let me come back to you guys on the board. I hope you guys all have good weekend plans. It's St. Patrick's Day tomorrow. I will be having my traditional Italian-style St. Patrick's Day, which is basically corned beef on a bed of lasagna or ziti. Actually, what I may do is I make corned beef in the crock pot with Sam Adams beer, the dark lager beer. I just fill it up with Sam Adams and let it cook for 10 hours. It is amazing how it winds up tasting when it's all said and done. Okay, so Jason Schaefer, who has the hashtag foureaster, Foureaster, the GFS looks like it has the deepest trough. The GFS, I will say, at least has been the most consistent of all the models. The European has been awful. The European has been all over the place. If we look at the last 4 or 5 runs, it has buried every, depending on which run you look at, it either buried the Northeast, buried the Mid-Atlantic, buried some combination of the two, and today, on today's run, it buried a very small geographic area from eastern West Virginia to western Virginia to western Maryland, and that was about it. It produced very, very little because of the fact that it has its system so far to the south. Huge difference with the two models, David Schwartz, absolutely. And again, I want to emphasize that you're going to see all sorts of flips back and forth over the next over the next 2 days. So we're basically going to be running. Really, I don't think we're going to have any clarity on this until at the earliest Sunday night. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe models will come together. So really, there's no way to know what we're going to get out of this until we get some sort of clarity on how this is all going to play out along the East Coast. And that's not coming. That certainly isn't coming right now with with the model volatility that we have. Higher than usual, I think, because of the fact that we have everything, still with these, extreme readings. I want to bring up at least the snow. Let's take a look at the snow maps because you're asking, so I'll bring them up. But these are not forecasts. Please bear that in mind. I'm going to punch up Europe first. Probably didn't produce too much here in the way of snow, at least across the British Isles. It looks like, anywhere from a trace to a few centimeters, a few pockets that get a little bit more, slightly heavier snows back on the continent across northern France and throughout much of Germany, the Netherlands, Germany, and then back up and through northern Italy and in the usual places that you would suspect would get snow. And of course, you go further east, you get into the big snows as you start to push in toward Eastern Europe and on up into southern areas of Russia. Now we'll come home to the U.S. I'll bring the tight northeast view, and then I'll go to the wider view. So this is the new GFS model run, which is showing, a much tamer version of what it showed earlier. I'll show you what it had earlier, but let's just say that the purplish area outlines 4 inches or more. So basically produces 4 to 8 or 9 inches. Some big amounts in southeastern Virginia, apparently. Down into the mountains of North Carolina. Weather Enlo, I hope you're paying attention to this. I have no idea if this is real or not. And I'll go back one model run so you can see the craziness that it produced from earlier today with a stripe of 12 to 20 inch snows from the southern half of Pennsylvania across the northern half of New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, southeastern New York, and throughout much of Connecticut into southeastern New England. Again, I'm just showing this to illustrate to you the volatility from run to run because of the variations of what models are doing. The Canadian, which is probably a compromise between the European and the GFS, although closer to the GFS than the European was. This is what it produced, and it had a snow shield, a weaker snow shield, but still impressive enough further south. Certainly for this time of year, this is a fairly impressive snowfall if it were to materialize. But again, I'm not really going to be sold on anything. It's probably better also to look in terms of accumulated precipitation here. You can see where the northern fringe of a half inch is on the Canadian model, and on the old GFS, it went nuts with precip here in some places. This is the new GFS, which actually matches up to the Canadian fairly well, half an inch to just north of New York City. The old run had 2+ inches of liquid in this large area from Long Island into southeastern PA, back through Maryland and northeastern Virginia. I don't know. I just don't know. I'll also show you, we'll pull up the full U.S., and we'll pull up the snow map so you at least get an idea of what's going to happen across the country. And notice big snows in the east and in the west and in the northern plains. So this is a very busy pattern with this blocky signature that we have, and weather systems, strong weather systems being allowed to crash into the west. The Pacific North America Index is going to be strongly negative, and that's going to mean action for the West Coast. And you can see that some big snows are being generated even in coastal areas in northeastern California on northward up through Oregon and Washington for later next week, actually when that second storm comes in for later next week. And in terms of rainfall amounts, I just want to check the rain out west. But big rains through California with some really hefty amounts being generated for the next 7 days on the order of half a foot in some places. So you certainly in those elevated areas are going to get a lot of snow out of this. So let me come back up front and center. And by the way, we will be on this weekend we'll be on here on YouTube. I'll be doing something over tomorrow and on Sunday. So be sure you tune in. And of course tonight we've got the Joe and Joe show on Facebook. Joe Rayo and Joe Cioffi. He was here with me yesterday, but we'll be together tonight on Facebook at roughly 9:15 Eastern time. If you go to my Facebook page. So I'm just trying to run through everybody's points here. Scott Olson, you got the right attitude. Don't lose any sleep over this. Enjoy your weekend. That's exactly what I'm going to do. If one wave is going to get squashed, would it be the first or the second? Timothy Veltman, that's a really good question. I can kind of make a case for both. I would say I would say, and this probably guarantees that the opposite will happen. If there's a chance of one of them being squashed, I'm going to say it's going to be the second one and not the first. Okay, I think you could make a case for either one or both, but I'm going to say if I had to pick one of them, the first one survives, the second one does not. And Lotto no and more. Snow for Easter. You're really pushing the envelope here. Easter is 16 days away. So by that time, I think, the pattern's going to be shifting around a little bit. It still looks like we're going to see a rather chilly pattern overall through the rest of the month and into the first month of April, by the way. A lot of the long-range guidance, particularly the European weekly models, are basically keeping it below average right through the middle part of April, believe it or not. Let's see, Delvin, it's 9:59 in London. I get my London time. What's the time? I thought the time difference in London, because we're at daylight. I thought the time difference was 5 hours, and it's 6 hours as you go into Europe. But did they move their clocks ahead the same time we did? I lose track about these things. Oh, they didn't. Thank you, Delvin. So London goes to daylight saving time on the 24th, which is next Sunday. Okay, that's good to remember, so that I could keep my my time zones in order. Matthew Goodman, Baltimore and Washington have been sitting in that snow hole this winter. There's a small snow hole that runs from south central Pennsylvania through north central Maryland in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. That's about the only area in the eastern part of the United States that has seen below average snowfall for this winter. Everybody else is either above or much above average. And by the way, just bear in mind too, next week is spring arrives on Tuesday, the 20th. It is very unusual to get big snowstorms in the coastal areas of the Northeast after the 10th of March. They are increasingly rare as every day goes by. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's rare, and you have to have a pretty good solid upper air setup for it to happen. But this has been an unusual month, so if it winds up that we wind up getting snow from both those waves and put down some unusual snow totals, it wouldn't shock me. 3 nor'easters in less than 2 weeks, and now maybe a 4th coastal storm in 2.5 weeks. That's an incredibly active period. Hard for me to remember when it's been this active. And I just saw, here it is. Ann Ames, New Hampshire cries, uncle. Boy, the snows that have been falling every day across parts of northeastern New York and in through Vermont and New Hampshire, especially the White Mountains, the snowfall amounts have been exceptional. I have seen some ski resorts, one in particular, I believe it was, I don't know if it was Whiteface or Wyndham, probably Whiteface, that had 50, close to 54 inches, 44 or 54 inches, almost 4 feet of snow in the last 48 hours. Just incredible. And that's on top of other snow that fell in the period before that. So, look, you're not going to get any snowfall accumulation forecasts or any idea about anything that's going to happen. We don't even know for sure if anything is going to happen and how it's going to happen until, certainly not through Sunday, and probably not until this thing is just about getting ready to get underway. So we're just going to watch this evolve all together and see how this fascinating pattern that we're in, see where it takes us now as we move into next week. Okay, folks, we're going to call it a night. Facebook at 9:15, the Joe Cioffi Show. I'll be on this weekend. Website posts at meteorologistjoecioffi.com. Angry Ben's on nycweathernow.com. Take care.